This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for podcast number 2 here of the Primetime Podcast here on Most Valuable Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything college football and college basketball. I say podcast number 2 because Brandon and I just got done with the normal podcast, talked a lot of playoff implications going into the final week of the college football season before we get to bowls and playoffs. We also got coaching things that we need to talk about, which the first one, before I get into my housekeeping, we're not going to talk about this, but I just see it on ESPN. Did you hear about Iowa State's Matt Campbell?
Hey, he got a 5-year deal.
Inked a new deal, so good for him.
He did. Congratulations to him. He deserves it.
Staying with the Cyclones, which will be good for them. But before we get into everything, a little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't checked out patreon.com, down below in the description, patreon.com/most valuable podcast. It's a way to help support the channel. If you like what we're doing here, want to see us strive and make better content, we can't do it without the support from you guys. And $10, you can be on a podcast, whether it's Fast Break, Onside Kick, Primetime Podcast. You can be on a podcast with us talking about what you want to talk about. And also, go on to iTunes, give us that 5-star rating, then do the same for the Onside Kick, the Fast Break, and the Rick and Johnny podcast. But we're going to talk about a lot of things today. UCLA, they got Chip Kelly. We'll talk about that after the fact. Kevin Sumlin, he's finally...
You're so happy.
Well, when I saw that, the first thing I thought of was ding dong, the witch is dead. Like, how many times... Well, and I don't mean it like I'm sure Kevin Sumlin's a great guy, not like that, but I think of it more of... I no longer have to see on our page 1 month ago, Kevin Sumlin. 2 months ago.
Kevin Sumlin be fired in 2017? Is this the last game for Kevin Sumlin?
Every other month we were talking about Kevin Sumlin and the hot seat. Don't have to do that anymore. We're going to look at Dan Mullen being hired as the head coach of Florida, and then we're going to look at our first topic, and we'll go right into it. And it's everything that is going on right now with the Tennessee Volunteers. They signed a kind of verbal agreement, a memorandum of understanding.
They had both signed.
You're going to be our head coach, but we understand you got to finish out the rest of the season before you can do that. Then there's protests at Tennessee from students. A.D. Curry backs out of the deal. Greg Schiano no longer the head coach he wasn't even announced, no longer the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. We are going to get into where Tennessee could go from here, but Brandon, I want to start with you. What are your thoughts about this whole crazy situation that really transpired all of yesterday?
I couldn't believe it. I honestly, I could not believe it. When I saw exactly what was happening and why they were backing out of the deal, I thought, how disgusting. How disgusting and how sad. Because does anyone truly, and in Kirk Herbstreit, you can go back and look at his tweets, and I know I retweeted it, so I would have it somewhere to look at, but it was basically one of those things where, do you have any facts that he did anything wrong, was involved in any wrongdoing or anything? Do you have all those facts? If you do, okay. And if you do and he did something wrong, fine. Sure, fine. But until then, it's all hearsay. It's all garbage. It's all crap. And these people just don't look good. They just don't look good. So I thought it was just really a shame. I thought the whole thing was terrible. The way that it had been handled, I thought that with the athletic director now, Curry, John Curry, I believe is his name is, he is in some of the hottest water now to me on both sides. The side that he actually backed out of this deal because there was pressure from fans and other people to do so because they didn't want to have him because of some things that they were saying he had been linked to in the Jerry Sandusky thing. Now, let me tell you, if he truly had known about things that Jerry Sandusky was doing, did not report them and allow them to continue, he's a bad man. he's a bad man. Then get rid of him. I wouldn't care if he didn't have. I wouldn't care if he wasn't the head coach of Tennessee, if he didn't have a job anymore, if he was in jail. But there is no proof. There is nothing that has come out saying that he's done something wrong. Mm-hmm. There is nothing that has come out and necessarily said that he's linked to this and then proven that he was linked to this. The Washington Post, I believe it was, back in 2016, when some of these trials were going on and stuff like that, his name was thrown out there. He denied it, as did Bradley, I think one of the other assistants. Mm-hmm. I believe he denied the report. And then they came out and they said, not those two guys, but a report came out and it was, well, they may have known about it, but not until after everything had already happened and come out into the limelight. Mm-hmm. So, what do you believe? And I find this to be incredible. So here's a little bit from the statement from Tennessee Athletic Director John Currie. And he said, I followed Coach Schiano's accomplishments throughout his career, have been fortunate to get to know him and his family over the last several years. As reported by the media, he was a leading candidate for our position among the most respected professional and college football coaches. He's widely regarded as an outstanding leader who develops tough, competitive teams and cares deeply about his student athletes. We carefully interviewed him and vetted him. Understand this. Tennessee football knows how bad they've been. Mm-hmm. They know the rut that they've been sitting in. So when he says they carefully interviewed and vetted him, they're not bullshitting. Mm-hmm. As we do candidates for all positions, he received the highest recommendations for character, family values, and commitment to academic achievement and student-athlete welfare from his current and former athletic directors, players, coaching colleagues, and experienced media figures. All those things, those are big things. I don't know exactly who they are. They didn't name them, but that's big. Coach Schiano worked at Penn State from 1990 to 1995. This is the most important part of this statement, in my opinion. Consequently, we, of course, carefully reviewed the 2012 investigation report by, is it Louis Free? Coach Schiano is, that was supposed to correct me, but I don't know why I'm asking. You're terrible with names. Mm-hmm. Coach Schiano is not mentioned in the Free report and was not one of the more than 400 people interviewed in the investigation. We also confirmed that Coach Schiano was never deposed and never asked to testify in any criminal or civil matter. And we confer with our colleagues at The Ohio State University who had conducted a similar inquiry after the 2016 release of testimony, which was what I was talking about earlier. I know that Coach Schiano will continue to have great success in his coaching career and wish him and his family well.
Well, it's like the tweet that I'm looking at here from, because I was trying to find the Hurt Street ones, but I found he quoted a Dan Wetzel tweet where he goes, and nobody knows the Sandusky case as well as Dan, and hear his take, which matches the vetting process at Ohio State and Tennessee. And Wetzel says, not going to relitigate the lengthy, complex Sandusky scandal, but headline is very misleading. A document included nonspecific allegation based on hearsay that Attorney General, who investigated everything, didn't take serious enough to investigate. That's a big difference. And the whole thing here, I have a problem with in this situation has everything to do with Tennessee's AD. We talked about in our first podcast, and I'm sorry if I'm spoiling it if you haven't listened to it, but like when we talked about Wisconsin, do you have the cojones to go out there and schedule a non-conference opponent that's going to be tough? Well, in this case, do you have the balls to say, hey, I vetted this guy. We talked to the proper channels. We know we're bringing in someone of character, and this is our guy. I know I get the point of like everyone says, oh, well, it's a tough decision for him to make 9 months into the job. Well, guess what? If you're A, Power 5 football coach, B, an SEC football, like AD, and you deal with football, because guess what? Football is your leading sport at Tennessee. You're not a basketball school, even though Bruce Pearl's trying to. Bruce Pearl's no longer there. He's with Auburn. Scratch that. You're no longer a basketball school. you've got to build this football program up. It's going to make you the most money. How do you do that? Greg Schiano's not a guy who's going to come in here and boom, national championship. But he could be a guy that comes in here, oh, let's turn the page 1, 2, 3, and he's the guy that turns it around for that next guy who comes in and wins you national championships. That's what he could have been. Now, because you don't have the balls and you let your student body, it's like Bill Polian always says on ESPN, once you start listening to the fans, you'll be sitting with them. That's plain and simple. Plain and simple. If you're the AD and you did your due diligence, have the balls to say, yes, this is the guy we're hiring. Have the balls to do it. That's the problem I have here. I don't have the problem with the actual protest, although you could say it's not a stupid reason, but you're kind of misconstruing everything and blaming somebody for something that we don't know. We're basically accusing him of something that was never proven that he did. It was never proven that he covered it up. That's where I have a problem with it, where the AD didn't go, no, you're wrong. This is who we're hiring.
The thing that concerns me the most, and it goes back to what you just said, this AD, John Currie, has no balls, and a guy who he said he knows Greg Schiano and his family very well, sounds like they could even be friends, was anything but a friend in this, was anything but a respectful, I think, human being. You had this guy, you brought this guy in, you did your proper vetting. If you're being honest, if you truly are being honest, and you did every possible thing that you could do to find out, which it sounds like they did, because it sounds like he talked about Penn State. He talked about back then. He talked about going and talking with Ohio State when the testimony was coming out in 2016. Urban Meyer was a assistant, at that time as well. So he did clearly enough to do that, and he's talked with Ohio State. And if you weren't able to find anything negative that came out against Greg Schiano, and you believe he's going to be the best guy for the job, then he is your guy, and you stick with him. And the fact that you were unable to do that, the fact that you felt some pressure and you went away with him and you said, no, we're not going to actually end up going with you, I think that's disrespectful. I think that is cowardice. And Ricky, you may be okay with the protest. I'll be honest with you. I don't care if it's your right, not your right. I've seen a lot of people do things that necessarily were technically their right that I didn't like, and people have seen me do things that they don't like that's technically my right. But I'll tell you what, I've never been a fan of protest. I've never been a fan in general of it. I don't like the concept personally. But I guess it gets things done.
Well,
I guess it gets things done. If you're on that side, something will happen, positive or negative. Something will happen. But I'm not even a big fan of peaceful protest. I guess I just don't like it because that then goes into something that could be. You have all these peaceful people, and one guy could ruin it. But I guess I just don't like it. It's like you dislike something, so you automatically let's go protest it. That's what our society has become. But I don't really, I'm with you in the sense of it's not really about them because they can stand up and they can bring the whole village out. But it's on Curry to say, guys, take your pitchforks, take your torches, and go back home because he's coming.
Well, and here's what I think. At first, three things. One, don't want to make this all I want to bring it back to football. Two, my stance on it, my real just simple stance with that is I'm not upset that you're right to protest, but I can disagree with what you're protesting. Sure, go ahead, it's your right to protest, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with you. Doesn't mean that I have to be on your side for that protest. Number three, and this brings it back in to the football realm. When it comes to Curry, if he would have just said, yes, Schiano's our guy, at the beginning, because let's be honest, football's a business. Although the college players aren't getting paid, the schools are making money off these kids. They're making money for these football programs, and football is the number one source of revenue for the sports. It's what funds everyone else. If the football team is good, it kind of spreads the wealth. I feel like everyone right away, there would be a dent, like people aren't buying as many jerseys, maybe merchandise goes down a little bit because people are protesting. But guess what? As soon as Greg Schiano started winning games, I bet you not more people would be coming back filling seats, buying merchandise, because that's the thing when teams win. And if he was accused of something and actually found guilty, I'd be having a different conversation with you.
We both would.
I wouldn't be having the conversation with you of, win games and people will forget about it. Because if you actually did it, don't forget about it. But if you didn't do it, let's just forget about it because you didn't do it. And now this puts Tennessee in a situation of they've got to find a coach. And the thing that I loved best is, I think it was Dan Patrick, it might have been Paul Feinbaum, who was like, if you're expecting John Gruden to walk through the door, keep dreaming. Because, it was Dan Patrick, because he said, this Tennessee job, and I agree with him, is not appealing. And guess what?
No longer.
It wasn't appealing at first, because you got to think about it this way. They wanted John Gruden. John Gruden basically pony up the dough. They're not going to pony up the dough that John Gruden wants. Then they're like, okay, Dan Mullen's our guy. Mullen gave him the walk around and basically went, whoop, bye, going to Florida. He blew him off. And then they're like, Greg Schiano's our guy. Like, they were looking at other guys and people gave them the runaround. Nobody wanted to go to Tennessee in the first place. Nobody's going to want to go to Tennessee now. And the first thing I think of is welcome to the bottom, because that's where I am with Illinois. Welcome to where we are, because Tennessee, that's where you are. You're with us now. And anyone who thinks Tennessee's this high, nice job now, you are highly mistaken. And I'll ask you, with the unappealing factor with it now, because of the situation kind of piled onto what it was already, do you have anybody that you, like, if you were Curry, is there anyone that you would look to and say, we're going to target this guy?
I don't know. I think it's really it's tough right now. I think I do. I think it's really tough right now. I think
because you got to find a coach.
You do. You have to find a coach, and there's going to be somebody. But before I say a couple of names, because of the precedent that has been set with the fans, with the students, with other people, with people on social media coming out, with state representatives coming out against this, that's the precedent that's been set. Mm-hmm. So if the fans don't like this next one, we'll just do that again. They got their way the first time. Why won't they get their way the second time? So that's number one, that what I don't like.
You want to know who's the first name that pops up when you type in Tennessee Vols job into Google? Jason Witten. He's not interested, by the way, but he's the one that...
I read the story. Is that there were people saying that Jason Witten, who was there from, 2000 to 2002, mm-hmm. actually could have an interest and would leave the Cowboys before the season was over to come and be the coach, and then those were squashed. I did see that came out, and that was completely a rumor. But mm-hmm. I think that they're really in a tough spot because who's really running this thing? The fans or the athletic director? Mm-hmm. That's the problem. John Curry, he is not going to be there much longer. That's what I think. He's only been there for 9 months. He's not going to be there much longer, especially if he's unable to get a coach that people can agree on. Well, he's not going to be there much longer.
If he's not going to be there much longer, if you're a coach, you're not going to want to go there because the job security is low.
That is why it comes down to who's somebody as a coach that could take a flyer. Who's at a point in their season where they're like, the team I'm currently with, not necessarily going anywhere. What can I go and do? How about this? How about this name? And the reason I think this is because you're talking baggage over here at Tennessee. You're talking baggage with this person, Bobby Petrino, Louisville.
I mean...
You're going to be losing Lamar, Star Action Jackson.
He also had, when he came back to Louisville, how he left Arkansas he was the one with like the motorcycle crash and had the thing around his neck. I could see it.
Had a couple different wives.
You know who
girlfriends.
There are two guys that I think of because right now I'm looking at articles and it's like John Gruden talking to Tennessee about coaching vacancy. I am not a believer in John Gruden anymore because I've come to the fact that John Gruden's only going to come to Tennessee if they're going to pony up the dough. And he's going to want, like, I think it was on the Dan Patrick show, I heard like $15 million. Like, he's going to want an absurd amount to be a head football coach for your team. And
maybe they should give it to him.
I don't see them ponying up the dough that John Gruden wants.
Can I ask you a quick question, though, before we move on to another point? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't they? If they want someone who is going to be good, who knows football knowledge, who had the success in the NFL, who's been a guy who just is a good coach, he knows young talent, he works with young talent all the time, has forever. Why would you not want to give him the money?
In my mind, there are two guys that I think could be cheaper and just as good.
Just as good.
Just as good. The first one, this is the one that might be not a long shot, but he doesn't have the head coaching experience, but he has that tie to the school. And the first guy I would call is T. Martin, who's the offensive coordinator with the Trojans. Has a connection to the school. I believe won a national championship the year after Peyton Manning left the Tennessee Volunteers. And he's a guy that knows offense. And if you want to win in football today, you need a guy who knows offense. The second guy I would think of, and this one might be the one that people go ludicrous on, why not bring in Kevin Sumlin? 8-5, 8-4, whatever it was, the record that we'd make fun of, it's better than what Tennessee is right now. I bet you Tennessee looked at those records that like A&M was at and be like, we'd take that. I know A&M don't want it, but we'll take it. Like, he's not a terrible coach. He's better than what you got. He's better than nothing. Why not look at Kevin Sumlin? He knows the SEC. He knows the area. He knows the culture of coaching in the SEC. But you look at it and go, well, you just got fired from an SEC team. Why would I want you? That's the only thing about Kevin Sumlin, why I would look for T. Martin first.
Has Tennessee called you yet?
No, I would not take it. I don't have the mind for that, Brandon. I don't have the mind to be a head football coach. Now, offensive coordinator, I'd take that job in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Tennessee, they had called me. They said I'd they said I'd probably be the head coach, but that there'd be all the stuff with pictures and stuff like that. They said probably. That was right after the Times called too. They were asking about if I could be their person of the year. Must have been right after Trump said no. But I think that honestly it's getting to the point. I make that joke because it's gotten to the point where you and I feel like really right now we're just kind of grasping at straws. Like I have no freaking idea who they're gonna have be their next coach because here's the thing: who freaking wants to be?
Exactly.
At this point, they have now started this culture where they have allowed the fans to rule, and that is not okay. I think that with a base, you can have a feeling of where your base is at, and that can give you a temperature kind of on the feeling of of where this team may be, of the support for this team. Because ultimately, yes, you have to get those fans' butts into those seats to make money. Okay? You've got to do it. I get it. You have to do it. So to some extent, they're extremely important. But are they important enough to be able to protest, to be able to have these Twitter rants, to be able to put these things out on social media saying, we don't want this guy, and you go, oh my gosh, okay, we won't take him. After you've already signed this agreement, you've already had reports coming out saying, well, Schiano's going to be the next head coach. And then a couple hours later, oh, all right, Schiano is not going to be the next head coach. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's sad. It's not how it should be. It's not how it should be. But again, I don't want to forget, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that those same fans that were bitching and pissing and moaning, they're going to go to your games. Yeah. They're going to go to your games when you're good. And for that reason, you need to be able to find someone still who's going to be good, who's going to be competitive. And again, at this point, I almost make the splash with Gruden. Fuck it. Bring in Gruden. Now shut the hell up. We brought in John Gruden. We paid a ton of money. Here you go. Will they do that? It sounds like most likely they will not. But you know what I'm saying? You almost now need to have almost the perfect, ideal candidate that's going to light up the eyes of every single person and go, whoa.
Let me ask you this. Yeah. If he doesn't get the job at Nebraska, do you try to bring in Scott Frost?
Yeah.
From Central Florida?
You do, but at the same time.
Because that's another thing. With the tweet that I saw about him, the way he's like, yeah, if they're not interested in me and I'd be upset, it's like, dude, why are we talking about them not being interested in you? Isn't that like for sure that they're interested in you because you're from Nebraska?
Here's a coin in the flip sides. For one, on the positive, I'd say if this could be his kind of premier coaching job into the Power 5, and it's kind of in this time, well, you're coming in, you're going to be trying to do your best. You don't have any necessarily huge ties with them and stuff like that. And, the fans are, they're going to know you at, Central Florida is this guy who won all these games, played nobody. But they can be interested. But on the other side, is that really how you want to start off your Power 5 coaching career? After this, this whole debacle, all this, this mess, this as someone, as some University of Tennessee official and source quoted, it's a hot mess.
Yeah.
It's a hot mess. They're right. They're spot on. It's a hot freaking mess at Tennessee right now. And it's all because of how this was handled. It's all because of how this was handled. And I've got to believe that AD John Currie is in line when he said that he did everything, him and other people, because he's not doing this by himself. He's got other people. He's got a team. He's got an interview committee that's doing this. At least that's typically, I believe, how it is. You've got a search committee that you're bringing in, not necessarily bringing in, but these people you're bringing in from the university, and you're having them go out and talk to this person and kind of get a feel for them. Will they be a good coach? All this kind of stuff. And you aren't finding anything wrong, then I'm believing that they didn't find anything wrong. And that's just... That, to me, is the most frustrating part, is because if they're saying that they found nothing wrong, but all these fans are saying, no, he's guilty. He's guilty of this and he's guilty of that. Well, is he? Is he really? If he was, I think he would have probably been deposed. I think he probably would have had
Wouldn't have got a job at Ohio State.
He would not have been at Ohio State. You're right. He would not have gotten this far and not have to speak in court about the Jerry Sandusky case. So is this just a lot of people who are upset just with Tennessee in general? Or are these people who are truly upset with Greg Schiano? I don't know.
And the last thing I'll say about it is this whole situation is a product of our time and the negative about social media, where back in the day, back way before we were born, even when I was a kid, if this were to happen, you'd hear about it on SportsCenter, you'd hear about it in the newspaper, on the local news, but you wouldn't hear about it until after the fact, until they've announced, hey, Greg Schiano's our head coach. Nowadays, with everyone first off tweeting like, oh, sources, and then, oh, reported, now everyone, Joe Blow sitting on the couch, has a megaphone. And this is, I'll say, a negative of social media and the bad of it. But I want to turn this, we've talked for a while on this, I want to turn it to you guys. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. What do you think about the Schiano situation? What do you think about AD? Is it John Currie, right? John Currie,
yep.
John Currie, and everything that's transpired at Tennessee. And let us know who you would want to see take over the Tennessee job. Let us know down below in the comment section.